I never thought a dusty, floral, patterned book hidden behind a loose brick in my late grandmother's pantry would effectively dismantle every heroic story I grew up hearing about our family's survival during World War II. But as I sat on the cold linoleum floor reading her frantic, tear-stained handwriting, I realized that the woman I called a saint had committed an unspeakable act to keep my father alive. For 80 years, our family prided itself on the Miller resilience, telling tales of how Grandma Evelyn outsmarted soldiers and shared her meager rations with the village. But the diary revealed a much darker reality of a woman who was forced to choose between her morality and her child, leading to a betrayal that resulted in the disappearance of an entire neighborhood family. Was I wrong for feeling disgusted by the woman who ensured my own existence? Or would you have committed the same soul-crushing sin if it meant your child wouldn't starve to death? I need you to walk with me through these pages because the weight of this secret is suffocating me. And I truly need to know if you think some family legacies are better left buried in the rubble of the past. My grandmother, Evelyn, was the matriarch of our family, a woman of iron will and soft smiles who lived to be 96 years old. In our small town, she was a legend. The local newspaper even did a feature on her once, calling her the Guardian of the Valley, for her supposed bravery during the occupation in the early 1940s. She raised my father, Thomas, as a single mother after my grandfather supposedly died a hero's death on the front lines. Growing up, I was mesmerized by her stories of hiding bread in the hems of her skirts and keeping the light of hope alive when the world went dark. She was the person I went to for advice, the one who taught me that honesty was the only currency that mattered. When she passed away last winter, she left the house to me, and as I began the painful process of clearing out 70 years of memories, I felt like I was walking through a museum of virtue. That was until I decided to renovate the kitchen pantry, and noticed that one of the bricks near the floor sat slightly uneven. Behind it, wrapped in a moth-eaten woolen shawl, was a small, leather-bound diary that Evelyn had never mentioned to a soul. The diary began in the spring of 1942. The early entries were filled with the mundane anxieties of a young mother, the rising price of milk, the sound of planes overhead, and the longing for her husband. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted from anxiety to raw, naked desperation. By the winter of 1943, the village was under a strict blockade. People were eating boiled leather and grass. My father, who was just a toddler at the time, was failing. Evelyn wrote vividly about the way his ribs began to poke through his skin, and how his cries for food grew weaker every day. She described the hollow look in his eyes that haunted her sleep. In the same neighborhood lived the Schultzes, a family who had somehow managed to keep a small stockpile of grain and salted meat hidden in their cellar. They were kind people, Evelyn noted, often giving my father a small cup of broth when they could, but they were terrified, knowing that if the occupying soldiers found their stash, they would all be executed. Evelyn's entries during this month became obsessive. She tracked the movements of the Schultz family, noting when they went to the cellar and where they kept the key. She wrote, "I look at Thomas and I see a ghost. I look at the Schultzes and I see a feast. May God forgive me for the thoughts I am having." The entries in late December were the hardest to read. Evelyn described a night when the cold was so biting that the birds fell frozen from the trees. My father had stopped crying altogether, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. That was the night the Guardian of the Valley made a choice. She didn't steal the food. She knew that wouldn't be enough to sustain them for the rest of the winter. Instead, she walked to the local commandant's office, the very men she told us she had resisted, and she made a trade. She told them exactly where the Schultz family had hidden their illegal stockpile in exchange for a guaranteed weekly ration of meat and flour for herself and her son. The diary described the scene with chilling detachment. The sound of the soldiers' boots on the frozen street, the screams of the Schultz children as they were dragged out of their home, hoarding against the state, and the way the commandant handed Evelyn a warm loaf of white bread as the neighbor's house was ransacked. She wrote, "I sat in the dark and stuffed the bread into Thomas's mouth while the Schultzes were loaded into the trucks. The bread tasted like ash, but his cheeks were warm for the first time in months. The Schultzes were never seen again. After the war, Evelyn played the part of the grieving neighbor, even helping to plant a memorial tree for the missing families of the village. She built a life of prestige on the literal hunger of those who had tried to help her. As I read the later entries, I saw the psychological toll it took. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a monster who was forced to play a saint. She wrote that every time someone praised her for her resilience, she felt like she was being stabbed. She kept the diary as a confession she was too cowardly to make aloud. So that's the situation I was in, standing in her kitchen with the evidence that my father's life, and by extension my own, was paid for with the lives of an entire innocent family. Before I tell you what I did with this diary and how it destroyed my relationship with my father, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have burned the diary to keep your grandmother's saintly image intact? Or would you have exposed the truth to give the Schultz family their justice, even 80 years too late? I couldn't stay silent. I took the diary to my father, thinking that he deserved to know the truth about how he survived. I thought he would feel the same moral weight I did, but I was wrong. My father, now an old man himself, was horrified, not by his mother's actions, but by me for tarnishing her memory. He called me ungrateful, reminding me that if she hadn't made that difficult choice, neither he nor I would be standing there. He grabbed the diary from my hands and tried to throw it into the fireplace, but I snatched it back. We had a screaming match that ended with him telling me that I was no longer his daughter if I intended to drag Grandma's name through the dirt. I realized then that my father had always suspected the truth on some level, but he had chosen the comfort of the lie over the pain of the truth. I decided that the Schultz family deserved a voice. I took the diary to a local historian, and the descendants of the Schultzes I managed to find through a genealogy site. They were shocked, having always believed their ancestors were simply victims of random war violence. Seeing their faces as the mystery of their family's disappearance was finally solved gave me a sense of peace that my own family couldn't offer. The aftermath was a total fracture of my world. My father hasn't spoken to me in 6 months, and my aunts and uncles have labeled me a pariah. They tell people that I've lost my mind, and that the diary is a forgery, but the local museum accepted the book as a historical document, and the plaque under the memorial tree in town was changed. It no longer just lists the Schultzes as missing. It acknowledges them as victims of betrayal. My grandmother's house, which was once a place of warmth, now feels like a tomb of secrets. I've realized that being a chronicle of a family means recording the ugly parts just as much as the beautiful ones. Our family tiles aren't made of gold. They are made of cracked clay and bloodstains, and ignoring that doesn't make us better people. It just makes us accomplices. I've lost my family, but I've found my integrity. I've learned that a grandmother's love can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be a terrifying, destructive force when it's stripped of its morality. The Miller legacy is over, but the truth is finally out in the open. I hope that by sharing this, I can encourage others to look past the myths their families tell them and seek the reality of their roots, no matter how heartbreaking it may be. If you think I did the right thing by honoring the victims of the past over the reputation of the living, please like this video. It's been a long and lonely journey to get this story out. Subscribe to Family Tiles Chronicle for more deep dives into the secrets that families keep and the cost of uncovering them. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Was Evelyn a mother doing what she had to do, or was she a traitor who should never be forgiven? I'll see you all in the next story.